Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tag Podcast. I have a very special guest for you guys today, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, lifting weights, getting jacked over 50, and why muscle is so important as we're getting older. So, Philip, welcome to the podcast. Please tell us a little bit about yourself for the audience.
Sure, Lynn. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Philip Pape. I'm the founder and host of Wits and Weights. It all started with a podcast because I personally had 2 decades of my life, my 20s and 30s, where I struggled with fitness and nutrition, had no clue what I was doing. I was an engineer behind a desk, very sedentary. And as I got older, as I had kids, I realized something had to change. So in my 30s, I started CrossFit thinking that was a solution, right?
We all did that. Yeah.
We all did that because that was around the right time, around 2010. But it was during those years for about 8, 10 years where I did a lot of experimentation. I learned how to use a barbell. I learned about conditioning, but I didn't really learn all the right things like how to progress and how to build muscle, how to control my diet in the right way and make it sustainable. So around when I was about 40, I was 39 turning 40, right before the pandemic, I finally did a lot of listening to podcasts, watching videos, reading books, came across the Muscle and Strength Pyramids by Eric Helms, and also Starting Strength, and some of the big nutrition guys in the space like Alan Aragon and Dr. Bill Campbell and all these names. I'm sure your audience knows a lot of these, and really just started to flood my brain with this so-called evidence-based fitness and nutrition and started to apply that myself. And I spent the year of 2020 building a home gym because that's what I had to do because gyms were
Yeah,
open.
we all did that in 2020.
Exactly. And I started squatting, deadlifting, pressing with barbells, just very simple strength-based movements, building over time, eating a lot of food, drinking a lot of whole milk because I didn't know what I was doing exactly.
Yeah.
And just learning. And through that year and the following year, I kind of started to figure out what worked with a lot of the information in the industry coming into my ears, but sorting through it and trying to cut through that noise. And had my first successful, I'll say, bulk and cut, let's just say, where I built some muscle for the first time in my life in a meaningful way, cut some fat, felt better about my body for the first time in my entire life because I was always self-conscious about my body, and then decided I wanted to share it with the world. So I started my podcast late 2021. Fast forward a few months, one of my guests, who was also a coworker at the time, wanted me to coach her. She was a power lifter. I said, "What are you talking about, nutrition coaching?" She's like, "Look it up." So I looked it up. When I commit myself to something, I go all in and I learn and I do it. I became a coach. I started working with people. And really that's now 3-4 years later that I've been helping folks with their nutrition and their building muscle.
Well done. So what was your biggest issue? You said you were self-conscious. Were you overweight or under-muscled? What was the problem?
Everybody knows this term, dad bod, right? So
Yes.
kind of like a little overweight or a little underweight with no muscle, depending on my diet. So if I was really gung-ho on my keto or my low-carb diet for a while, which I did,
Yes.
then I would, lose a bunch of weight, but lose a bunch of muscle. I didn't have muscle. So then I'd feel like skinny fat. And then the other extreme was just, overweight, didn't want to take my shirt off, pale white guy with, on the beach with his shirt on kind of deal. So yeah, but it's some degree of the same struggles that your listeners can all relate to in some way of just, I don't know what to do. I'm a hard worker. I have a decent career. I'm a family guy, but I'm really self-conscious. Don't know what to do with my physical fitness.
Yeah, I think this happens a lot. And my audience is ladies over 50, and we're all struggling. The hormones are changing, and everything that worked for us before, as far as weight loss or getting fit, just doesn't work anymore. And a lot of women are believing that, okay, well, we need to work harder. We need to run further. We need to do more cardio, burn more calories, eat less calories. What do you say to that?
I challenge the idea that it actually ever worked. And because I use the same messaging, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, what worked for you in your 20s? I think what happens is, your hormones are at their peak. Your ovarian function for women is at its peak in your, teens and 20s, right? Because that's your peak reproductive years, according to evolution. And for men, that's testosterone. You have a bunch of muscle mass that you've grown through your teenage years, through puberty. And you have all this function going on. So you just don't know what you don't know. And then once you get to your 30s and 40s, as the hormones decline, and then the muscle mass declines, and then life gets more stressful, right? And you start moving less without even realizing it. Then it just starts to accumulate that the lifestyle you've led would inevitably lead to this point. So that's kind of what I say to it. And I also say that no matter what age you are, you can change it to the day you die, till your 90s. You can change that trajectory and be healthier and more fit and functional.
Isn't that cool that you can actually build muscle at any age? You can start at any age. Obviously, if you have a background of working out, it's easier to build. But the fact that it's never too late, like, really gives people a lot of hope.
Yeah, and women in particular, because your audience is mostly women. Would
yes,
you say?
Mostly women. Yes.
There's like a fragility narrative in the space right now, right? Where like, you're broken and you can't do this, and it's fear mongering, right? In my opinion, where if I just dispel one myth, for example, women can build muscle at the same rate as men. That might be a surprise to you right now if you're listening, because you start with less muscle mass. I'm sorry to say, that's just the luck of the draw. Women have more body fat.
We're blessed with more fat.
Exactly. But it doesn't matter how much testosterone you have, whatever, you can build muscle at the same rate as men. That's one myth. And then the other thing is the hormone decline or menopause. Menopause transition is like a 3.5-year period, right? And I've talked about this on my show as well. I've learned a lot about it for a guy, right? I've learned a lot about it. And it's, while yes, the progesterone drops, the estrogen changes, DHEA, like all the reproductive hormones, follicle stimulating hormone, and it happens really quickly. A lot of what we see doesn't really have to do with aging. It just has to do with the lifestyle. And what I like to tell women is, if you can get the lifestyle together, right? Which there's a way to do that with a minimum effective dose that's time efficient and not like super stressful. You can then see what's left in terms of pharmaceutical support or HRT support or something like that you might need. But a lot of women and men find that just improving their lifestyle mitigates a lot of those issues. And then the fragility narrative totally goes away. I mean, I talk to women every day who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They're just living a great life. And they might have struggled a lot more if it weren't for the lifestyle changes.
So why muscle? Why is muscle so important?
Oh, this is a big one. Muscle is like an endocrine organ, right? It's part of your hormonal system, and we don't think of it that way. It's effectively, other than your skin, it's kind of your biggest organ on your body, if you think of it. It's the one thing that you have the most control over in terms of change, in terms of your tissue, right? Because yes, you can change your body fat, that's energy storage, but your muscle mass is part of your physical tissue, and it's associated with every marker of longevity, of health, of metabolism, of inflammation, of anything you can possibly say that leads to the decline in aging, such that if you can improve it, you're going to turn back the clock. You're going to be 20 years younger than your peers by the time you're in your 60s and 70s, in terms of your physical age. And you're going to avoid a lot of those things that we worry about, like fragility, falls, bone fractures, type 2 diabetes, all the obesity related diseases as well, because building muscle supports losing fat and it allows you to carry more fat with less health issues. So I just told you like the benefits of muscle, right? But it is one of the most strong predictors of how well we age because of all of those. Metabolic health and glucose and insulin sensitivity is another big one. I love to talk about, Lynn. People are worried about carbs. Well, if you have more muscle and you're training for muscle, both of those are huge sinks for glucose and glycogen. So you could eat more carbs and your food will be better partitioned in your body so that you can thrive even on higher calories. So it just cascades to one benefit after another.
I love it. What's your diet like, Philip?
My diet is pretty flexible. So in terms of...
So you don't follow like a keto or carnivore or any kind of strict diet?
I do not. No.
Okay.
And I don't advocate for that either. I'm not against somebody following a protocol or diet if the end result is it works for them and it makes them feel good. That's the goal, right? As opposed to doing it because you think it's the right thing to do. My personal diet is anchored in protein. So plenty of, and we can get into numbers, but sufficient protein for building muscle, holding on to muscle. And then I have plenty of fats for hormone support, energy, and then the rest is carbs. So when you do it that way, you end up having probably like 15, 20% of your diet is protein, maybe 30% of your calories is fat, and the rest is carbs. So like I mean, I can get into details, but
Yeah,
as
get
far as
into
food,
details because let's talk about
yeah,
protein because we're
sure.
always on about how important protein is as we're
Hmm.
getting older. And I always tell the ladies, make sure you prioritize protein. Make sure you're
Yes.
getting enough protein because it's very difficult. If you're looking at like, 2 grams per body weight, pound body weight, right? That's
Hmm.
that's quite a bit. Like for me, I need to be eating like 120, 140 grams of protein a day. And it's hard. Like now, for the first time, I started tracking my macros and my macros and everything, which I've never done before. And I'm shocked at how hard it is to
Mm.
get the right amount of protein in for my body. So
Yep.
what can we do with that? Or do you even recommend that to consume higher amounts of protein?
No, I get the question all the time. Just yesterday, my group, a new client asked, she's like, my target seems to be around zero point 0.7 grams per pound, but I've heard you need 1 gram per pound, and that's so much more. How do I do it? And first I said, okay, hold on, take a
Mhm.
step back. Zero point 0.7 grams per pound is what the evidence currently suggests
Oh, sorry, I
is,
was talking about
yeah, yeah.
kilos. So what I
No,
was
no,
talking about
I
is,
got it.
yes,
I
exactly.
figured you were.
Yeah,
You're,
yeah,
you're talking about
yeah,
the
yeah.
1.6 to 2.2 grams
Yes,
per kilogram, or zero
exactly.
point 0.8 or zero point 0.7 to 1
Per
gram per
pound.
pound of,
Exactly.
should I speak in metric or
No, either one is
per?
fine. Either
Okay.
one is
Okay.
fine. I'm in
All right.
Europe, so I'm like all mixed up.
Yeah.
Canadian living in Europe.
Yeah.
So it's like half my brain's in kilos, the other half's in
Got it.
pounds.
So let's just say the lower end of that. So the zero point
Yeah.
0.7 grams per pound or the 1.6 grams per kilogram is more than enough for 95% of what you're looking for in terms of your needs. Now, I always tell people, like, if you can bump it up a little more, you might see other benefits for satiety, fullness. You might have an advantage with your muscle building and preservation, especially in fat loss. So when you're in a
Mhm.
calorie deficit, having more protein can help hold on to that muscle more easily. But you have to balance that with sustainability and variety and like what you like and what how many calories you have. Because if you're a lower metabolism person, just naturally, it's going to not leave you as much room for the fats and carbs. So you might
Mhm.
have to make some trade offs. If you're a guy that eats 3,000 calories, it's like, why are you not getting the full gram per pound? Because you
Yeah.
also are going to have lots of carbs and fats. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. As far as getting it, there are so many sources of protein. If you're an omnivore, of course,
Mhm.
vegetarians and vegans, it's harder.
Yes.
You've got any animal-based source, lean meats. Seafood is one of my favorites. So
Mhm.
low mercury tuna like skipjack, any white fish, right? Salmon's great, but it also has higher fat, so you just have to watch
Mhm.
for that. And shrimp, I love peel and eat shrimp as a snack. It's like pure protein.
Yeah.
So lean meats, also dairy, any form of dairy. Now people think eggs, but eggs do have a lot of fat, so you want to like add egg whites with eggs if you need more protein. And of course, there's cottage cheese, there's Greek yogurt, there's Fairlife milk. And then you have all the plant-based sources like oats and all the soy-based products like tempeh and tofu and soy. Or I already said soy, and yeah, I think I basically listed most of them.
Okay. So you're advocating for high protein but lower fat, if I hear correctly?
Okay, so we anchor the protein on zero point 0.7 to 1 gram per pound or 1.6 to 2.2 gram per kilogram. Then I recommend 30% of your calories from fat plus or minus 10%. So it's a big range.
Yes.
And 30% again is like a kind of a natural spot. A lot of people will fall. A lot of women I work with will tend to just eat leaner. So it'll fall more like 25 or 20% of their calories. And then a lot of guys I know, they eat more meat, that have more saturated fat or something, and they might be up in 35%. Or if you come from the keto world, you just are used to eating more fat in your
Yes.
diet, and that's fine. And then carbs are everything that's left. So if you're eating, let's say, I don't know, 2,500 calories, that might look like 150 or 200 grams of carbs,
Mhm.
depending on how much protein you need. If you're above that, it's going to get into two, threes, and 400s, which tends to be more men, but a bigger, stronger woman might be up there as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting about fat because I was in the keto world for many years, keto carnivore. But with keto, you're really focusing on fat. You're like
Mhm.
70% fat and moderate to low protein. But now things are changing. So even in the keto world, now they're recommending lower fat, especially for women over 50 as your hormones are changing. They're saying that your body's not able to tolerate as much fat anymore. And in order to lose weight, you really need to reduce your fat and up your protein, which kind of goes against the whole keto values. Have you noticed that with your clients?
I mean, my clients come in right away knowing my philosophy that it's
Uh-huh.
more flexible and like not not specific to a diet. And so
Yeah.
they're probably already open to that idea. But here's the way I frame it. Instead of like what you shouldn't have, right? It's what you should have. And you
Yeah.
alluded to this by saying protein. I think of, okay, what are the pillars that we need for our health, for our longevity, for our strength, for all of our goals? Protein is great for all of them, right? Because you're going to
Yes.
build tissue, you're going to repair yourself, even when you're injured, when you're sick, like protein's great. And then fat, you don't need too much fat. You need a certain amount of fat to support hormone health, but not more than that. Fat is needed for your cells, your mitochondria, and so on. But I like to say, okay, where does carbs come in here? Because carbs is what's been fear mongered. And I think in the keto world, that's like, or in the carnivore world,
Yeah.
plants, fiber, carbs are like a big no-no. But I would say, look, we know that diets high in fiber are more associated with better mortality outcomes, better health outcomes. We don't have long-term studies on diets low in fiber. So it's more of a like, maybe you're taking a risk. Maybe you just don't know if you don't have fiber in your diet. I prefer to look at it as fiber helps you stay full. It helps with your gut. It helps with your bowel movements, all that stuff. And it gives you a lot of, and it's associated with plants and the carbs that keep you full, right? The high fiber carbs. The rest of carbs, I lean into the muscle side of the equation and I say, look, having more carbs is going to help with building muscle and strength and having more energy. And if that's important to you, you're going to see a difference 95% of the time. And what I mean by that, Lynn, is inevitably I have a client that comes in, they do fasted training. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with fasted training. In fact, recent research showing women doing fasted training, they can have just as successful outcomes as not. And I kind of used to be on the fence on this and say, you should eat before you train. However, it seems anecdotally that most people who eat before they train will perform better when they train, and therefore they'll get a little bit faster progress over time, and they'll just feel better. Have that banana, have that whey protein before you eat. And that's where carbs are powerful, because carbs are glucose, they're sugar, right? They get converted into glycogen in your muscle, in your liver, and that's an immediate store of energy in the form of glycogen along with your ATP when you work out and when you train. When you're lifting heavy weights, you need that spike of energy when you go into that heavy, eccentric on the way down, and then you need to explode back up. Clients who don't do that report feeling drained, feeling wiped, not getting all the reps, feeling like they couldn't go up in weight this week, something stalled. Those are the kind of things I'm talking about with carbs. Not to mention carbs spare protein. So when you have more carbs, you don't necessarily have to have as much protein as well, and it helps you have a more balanced diet.
Very interesting. What do you think about progressive overload when it comes to training?
It's everything. Progressive overload is everything. So if we think about why muscles grow, they grow because of mechanical tension. That's it. They grow because you are training really close to failure. Your body gets stimulated through a hormonal process, right? Growth hormone, testosterone, everything. And your body says, you know what? You just pushed me so hard that I'm not quite capable of that. While you're sleeping, we are going to increase the size of your sarcomeres, that's your muscle cells. We're just going to, we're going to adapt to this, right? We're going to adapt while you sleep. Next time you go to the gym, you're going to be able to add a few pounds to the bar, right? It's up to you now to do that. So that's progressive overload. So like the muscle tension happens when you push close to the limit, but then every time you go to the gym, you have to keep pushing close to the limit. So another way to put it is you're always training within a few reps shy of failure. And because you're getting stronger, those few reps shy of failure is going to be a heavier weight or more reps or more sets every time you go to the gym for that lift.
What do you say to women who are worried about getting too big, too bulky? This is very common. I know a lot of women shy away from lifting weights completely because they think they're going to be huge.
If you want the lean, toned, athletic look, if you want a six pack, if you want defined biceps and a back and to look like a badass woman who is strong but lean, you have to build muscle. And I'll tell you what, this is the joke. I always say, I would love to get bulky myself, and I have a hard time doing it. It takes years of lifting and eating and growing and being in a surplus, let alone performance enhancing drugs. When you look in your Instagram feed, trust me, you know this, Lynn. If you're not careful, you look at a couple good physiques on Instagram and you get flooded with all the women with the 8-packs and on the beach. And it's all doctored up. It's all photos. And a lot of times it's drugs too. It's these elite bodybuilder types. Women, you're not going to get bulky at all. Building visible muscle takes years. Most clients who I work with, like in short order, they're like, I want more muscle now that I've gotten into this. I see how
Yeah.
cool it is to have the little Christmas tree on my back and the nice cut in my shoulders and the little bit of, line in my biceps. My wife jokes about it because I got her doing a program. I don't coach her, but I said, here, she
Yeah.
wanted one. I said, here you go. And she's like, look at my arms now, just from a little bit of stress on your muscles. So yeah, you're not going to get bulky.
And we all want beautiful arms. I mean, that's my struggle. That's what I always struggle with. And I've been, training, lifting weights, working out, bouldering. I do everything, and I cannot get the definition in my arms that I would want. And I would kill for that.
Yeah, so it's funny when we talk about physique, which there's nothing wrong with having a vanity goal, because at the end of the day, I always tell people physique is an expression of a lot of things. It's
Yeah.
an expression of strength and function and health and how you look, and it all ties together. But if you really want to build the visibility, you're going to have to specialize for a bit in that muscle group, right? Like maybe train it two or four times a week, depending, 2 or 4 exercises a week. You're going to have to lose enough body fat to show it.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to repeat that cycle over time, over several years.
Yeah.
So like the problem for a lot of women is they never want to spend the time to truly build muscle. They want to recomp, which we can do, but
Yeah.
I'll give an example. I just had a client, finished working with her. She wanted to lose 10 pounds of fat. At the end of the day, she lost 6 pounds of fat and gained 3 pounds of muscle. Now, do you think she was disappointed? No, she was thrilled because she felt better. She looked better. She had smaller waist size. So she actually ended up only 3 pounds lighter on the scale, but with a way better physique than we started, right? And it takes time. And also you have to sometimes lose body fat. That was like 5 or 6 months, and that wasn't all in a fat loss phase.
Yeah.
I always think you should spend a month or two dialing in your behaviors and habits first before you do a fat loss phase. So the fat loss was like 10 or 12 weeks. Yeah.
Wow. That's very impressive. I'm sure she looks amazing.
Yeah. But this one client, I can tell you, she went through a lot of mental and emotional struggles that we worked through. And this is common, of like impatience, right? Because you think, okay, my goal is to lose 10 pounds on the scale. And really that's not your goal. Is it? Your goal is to feel like yourself, like the person on the inside, right? Is to be the confident person you are, and to like be able to play with your kids or grandkids, or just go do the sport, show up confidently at work, all those things are really what you want. And there's a lot of emotional stuff to work through sometimes that have nothing to do with the nuts and bolts of physique development. You know what I mean?
No, it's true. And it is true what you're saying, like the self-confidence that it gives you. Like I do bouldering as well. So when I come out of the bouldering club and I climb down that wall and I'm like, I walk out and, my muscles, everything's all pumped up and I'm like, I'm so badass. I'm walking through the park, like anyone gonna mess with me? Like it's an amazing feeling. Like I love the fact that I'm 55 and I'm strong, that I feel strong. I can carry anything. I can pick it. I carry my husband around and he's like over 200 pounds, or my son, and I love having that strength. That makes me feel really, really powerful compared to a lot of women who, my age or even younger, they start getting frail and weak and their bones are deteriorating, and it's just a really sad thing to see, and it's so easy to avoid. Now,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I hear the stories every day, either, 65-year-old woman who was having trouble getting off the chair and now she deadlifts and can get knees feel good. I mean, I hear this all the time with joints, joint pain, because that affects a lot of people, and especially women, and bone density concern for osteopenia, osteoporosis. And a lot of that is mitigated when you start lifting weights, because you're loading your skeleton and your muscles to do what they're designed to do. And you're therefore starting to bring everything up to support your spine. You're bringing everything in line with your hormones. It's just a beautiful thing. So to me, I can't say enough about lifting weights. I know that's why you brought me on, but like to anybody listening, if you're not doing it, it's okay. You can start, and we can talk about like practical steps, how to start.
Yeah, that was my next question. Like
Okay.
where would someone start? If I've never worked out before, I'm quite intimidated. I'm scared to go to the gym. I don't want people laughing at me. Maybe I'm overweight. I need to lose some weight. And you're shy, you're intimidated. Where do you start?
It really depends on the person, but for a lot of women that I've talked to, either if they're okay with going to the gym, it's having a very basic functional program that you're confident in that you can do like 2 or 3 days a week, right? If you don't want to go to the gym, like you said, gym intimidation, there's stuff you can do at home with body weight, with dumbbells. If you're listening and you have the space and investment, I can give you a home gym guide that's like gives you options for how to set up a power rack and a bar and plate. I know it sounds crazy. You're like, oh my God, he's talking barbells. But let me tell you, barbells are a game changer for a lot of people I work with because they're very safe, simple tool that can progress for the rest of your life. And it's like
Yeah.
the only thing you would have to buy and you don't have to worry about all the machines and everything. So I always say start where you're at and your level of enthusiasm because some women I've talked to, they're like, they have an aversion to any thought of working out because of something in their past where it was like it's miserable or it didn't work or they got made fun of or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of be sensitive to that and say, okay, what can we do at home where you practice the movement patterns, the squat, the picking up, the deadlift, the pressing? Just practice the movement patterns and take equipment that will make it hard for you. So that could be your body, right? If you've got extra weight, great. That's an advantage because that weight is going to be load on you. Take
Yes.
advantage, reframe it. That's an advantage. It's also a dieting advantage we can talk about. But yeah, start where you're at with like dumbbells or bands or body weight. Do the basic movement patterns, and 3 days a week doing squats, deadlifts, and some sort of press is huge. As long as you go up in weight or reps each session, not each week, each session when you're a
But
beginner.
if you're doing body weight exercises, for example, how can you, would you just increase the duration or what would you do?
Yeah, so that was going to be my next thing is you're going to hit a wall. You're going to get
Hmm.
too strong for that, right? And
Yes.
and because I don't know where you're starting from. Like when I was helping my mom out a couple of years ago, she was having knee pain and couldn't get off the couch. We started on a chair. And
Hmm.
then after a week, she's like, the chair's too easy. What do? I said, let's go with a low box. And
Hmm.
then after that, she's like, what do I do next? I say, okay, now we put the bar on your back. It might just be a PVC pipe,
Yeah.
or it might be a barbell or women's barbell or whatever. And so you're going to have to do that. So I have a lot of clients or people I've spoken to who, for whatever reason, they can't have access to a barbell or a
Yeah.
gym, but they have dumbbells. I strongly suggest the adjustable dumbbells. You know, they're not the cheapest in the world, but like they're compact and you're
Hmm.
probably going to invest $500 or $600 to get the really big ones that'll let you grow for several years,
Yeah.
especially as a woman. I'm not belittling women, but women tend to be less strong than men. So you have a little more leeway on the dumbbells. But I will say most people will top out pretty soon if you're doing it right. And you're like, what do I do next? Well, then barbell machines and cables, you know, if you can get
Yeah.
to a gym or barbell at home is where I would go. Yeah.
Would you recommend hiring a trainer? Would that be important in the beginning to learn to do the
100%.
exercises properly?
Yeah, 100%. And you're going to find this funny, but a lot of people I work with, I don't recommend they hire me because I'm a nutrition coach slash lifestyle coach, and I do a lot of the like my prerequisite is that you're already lifting when you come to me, and I want to help you refine your technique. I would actually work with somebody in person who's local.
Hmm.
You know, you can get an online coach, and a really good one could be decent with the form checks and stuff, but it's really hard to see your mechanics and fix them in real time
Yeah.
without being in person. So if you can get word of mouth recommendations for a good coach who knows what he's talking about, I know it's hard. They can at least help you with some safety and confidence with the form early on. Yeah.
So that would be
But
like
yeah,
initially,
yeah,
right?
yeah, initially. But then I'll tell you what, even if you're not going to be perfect, like to this day, I'm always going to be personally working on my form, right?
Mhm.
So once you're kind of got a basic thing going, online form checks can be very powerful, right? So like I did it with clients or in our group where you could just post a video and I'm going to go in and either do a screen share or in text say, hey,
Mhm.
you know, I see you've got more room for depth there. I want you to use this cue for your deadlift. You know, I want you to look straight out, like those little cues that help people fix their form. And it's just a constant process of improvement.
I love that. Well, have you ever heard of exercise snacks before? I'm a big fan of exercise snacks. What do you think of that? Okay, obviously it's not really the progressive overload and getting jacked, but it's, I think, also a great way for people to stay fit, especially when they're very busy. You know, I always tell people while you're brushing your teeth, do 10 squats. While you're waiting for the water to boil, do counter push-ups. Do you think those small exercise snacks, do you think they make a difference? Or in the big picture, it's not enough?
They do. I would never discourage them. They're really helpful. We have to look at our goal here, right? If the goal is, like you said, to get strong and build muscle and get jacked, they're probably not going to move the needle a lot
Hmm.
because pretty quickly you're going to be too strong for them to challenge your muscles.
Yes.
So you're not really doing them for that. I see exercise snacks. Let me let me clarify two categories. There's splitting up your workout routine into maybe a couple times a day. That's not really exercise snacks. That's more of, working around your schedule. Exercise snacks would be every half hour, every 2 hours, whatever. You run up the stairs for a minute, right? Or you go and walk around for 2 minutes, or you do the air squats. There's a really cool study from 2021. I actually reviewed it on my podcast, where they compared air squats every 30 minutes to walking every 30 minutes to nothing and just sitting down all day. And these were all people who were sitting, so desk jobs for 8 hours. And they found that the walking had the biggest impact on muscle protein synthesis and blood flow and insulin sensitivity, like all the health markers. And it was massive. It was like people who sat all day, their muscle protein synthesis dropped by half. People who walked once every 30 minutes, it went up by 47% from baseline,
Wow. And
just
the
from
people
moving.
who squatted?
It was a little bit less than the walking group.
Uh-huh. But
Yeah, it was less than the
it's a good
walking.
alternative if you can't walk to at least
Yeah, yeah,
then do a few squats.
absolutely. Although I know a lot of people most people would be like, thank God I don't have to squat. Let me just walk.
I can just walk. Yeah, it's much easier for sure.
Yeah. But so I've been telling people, and I have an app on my phone. I think it's called Stand Up. It's like a free app that you can set a reminder, and every 30 minutes it reminds me to get up and move around. Even now we're on this podcast, I'm standing, right? I'm
Yeah,
standing.
I
That's
see
another thing
that.
I like. But we're going to be not stuck. This is great for an hour, but I'm not going to have my break. So after that, I'll go for a walk.
Yeah.
And it's huge from that perspective. So there's a lot of studies on walking in general, step
Yes.
count, and on movement snacks that just show game-changing levels of improvement for health, mobility, joint fluid, synovial fluid in your joints, vascular health with how some people buy those little ellipticals for their feet,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that
for the
even,
desk, right? Under the
yeah, and
desk.
even that shows those kinds of results too, of like just the fact that you're moving your body in some way, on a regular
Incredible.
basis. So
Because
yeah, I'm a big fan.
we just spend way too much time just sitting around,
Yes.
lying around, lounging around, scrolling on the phone. I mean, humans that are meant to be moving. We are not plants, right?
Yeah, it's an independent risk factor. Like you
Yeah.
have people who I've seen three different scenarios. I've seen people who lift a lot and then they don't do anything
Mhm.
else. I see people who lift and then they walk and they don't do anything else. And then people who lift, walk, and move. And on each of those levels is kind of a step change in the biomarkers for health and longevity. So
Yeah.
like somebody who lifts but doesn't do anything else, they're going to have great benefits from the lifting, but they're actually letting a lot of it go to waste, if you will, with their nutrient partitioning and everything else because they're sitting around. Like
Yeah.
it's almost inflammatory to sit around. I mean that in the true blood sense of inflammation, C-reactive protein, interleukin 6, like the actual measurable blood markers, not the hocus pocus inflammation the
Mhm.
influencers talk about, right? Because seed oils aren't inflammatory. We can get into that whole thing. Anyway, sorry. But then the middle category is if you lift and you walk, but you still sit around all day, we still see a lot of issues with health markers. And so you've got to do all of them: lift, walk, and move.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I mean, walking is definitely like one of the best exercises, and pretty much anyone can do it anytime. If I don't do my 20,000 steps a day, I feel like, what am I doing with my life? Like that's like
20,
the,
that's great. That's
yeah.
impressive.
You should
That's
see
impressive.
my parents are 75 and they're like 22, even for the other day they did 40,000.
Are they
Just
retired?
they retired, yes.
Okay.
I've
Yeah.
walked the Camino de Santiago with them twice. So, we're
Yeah.
like a walking family. And they're 75, they have no joint issues, no heart disease, like no pain, no back pain,
It's huge.
nothing. Like people don't realize that, the people that are sitting home with knee pain and hip replacements and all that, it's no, normally not from overuse, it's not from exercise, it's from lack of use.
100%. Yeah, no, there's a lot of counterintuitive things that I see in older generations. You know, I think of my in-laws. They just recently discovered the benefit of walking on their treadmill at home, and oh
Mhm.
my gosh, my knees feeling better. Oh my gosh, my shoulders fit. And they're in their 70s. You finally figure this out, you know, but
Yeah.
they're too stubborn to like listen to others, you know, give them advice, right? You understand that. But yeah, the younger generations, I think, were, and through podcasting, we're trying to get that message out of just being active, moving around. Imagine the implications that we'll have when we're all older on our children not having to take care of us and not burdening the healthcare system. And that all leads to a better economy and better everything else. Anyway, yeah, I'm very passionate about it.
No, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
want to be able to play with your grandchildren or even your great grandchildren and get on the ground and, play with them on the floor and get up and all that. I mean, it's so important.
Yeah, and the other thing I hear, and you probably do as well, is the back issues, right? When you
Hmm.
get older, and the knees and the shoulders. And
Yes.
you said like being mobile is part of it, and also lifting weights has helped a lot of people in those areas. I work with a lot of engineers because that's where I
Mhm.
come from. Who, I finally convinced them just do some deadlifts. That's going to solve your back issues. They're like, how can that be? Isn't going to make it worse? Fear mongering, like, and they start deadlifting like a week later. Oh my gosh, my back pain is gone, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a miracle or anything. It's just common sense that when you start to use your body, whether it is walking, whether it is lifting, you're using what's there. It's kind of like you're a robot that was sitting gaining dust in the corner. Somebody turned you on and you started moving and oiling up your joints again, right?
Well, as they
And now
say,
you're like, boom.
motion is the
Yeah.
lotion,
Motion is lotion. Yeah. And
right?
and what and if you think of lifting weights, you're putting a lot of gravitational load on mechanical joints and connections in your body, right? Like all your muscles insert into bone. You have tendons and ligaments, which are connective tissue. You have cartilage, you have the fluid that connects it all. And you're basically just making all of that work mechanically, like, crank up again and start to build and get stronger and bigger, and the engine's bigger. So all your whole body is now just feeling lighter and more athletic. You know what I mean? Like it's a great visual.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. So, how many times a week would you recommend lifting weights for someone who's just starting out?
I think a beginner 3 days a week is solid. 3 days for like a half hour to 45 minutes usually.
That's all? Doesn't have to be longer.
Yeah, yeah. If you look up, if your listeners look up starting strength, for example, it's a basic barbell program. You'll see it has 3 movements and it's
Mhm.
3 days a week. Monday,
Mhm.
Wednesday, Friday through. And when you first start, even if you take long rest periods, which you should be, this is not circuit training. This is not endurance training. You should be. It should take maybe 45 minutes. Now, as you get stronger and the weights get heavier, it might take a little longer. Also, as you become more advanced of a lifter, you're going to add more things in. Maybe you go to 4 days a week, right? It's all about volume and frequency based on how you adapt. So, like if you don't do it enough, if you don't squat enough, frequently enough, your body's just going to detrain back to its current strength level and it'll never progress. And then you're just wasting time when you go to the gym. You're like maintaining what you have.
Mhm.
So that's why you have to have enough volume and frequency.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as far as the exercises, would you recommend just focusing like on the basic exercises like pushing, pulling, squats, that kind of thing, deadlifts, bench presses, or should people get into the more complex exercises?
Yeah, I would start with the natural human movement patterns done with the full range of motion. So what you just said, and people put them in different categories. They'll say hinge, push, pull. They'll say squat, deadlift, whatever. From an exercise perspective, it looks like a form of squat where you're going all the way below parallel,
Mhm.
right, with some load. So that could be a goblet squat with your dumbbell in your front of you. It could be a front squat. It could be a back squat. I'm partial to the ones that let you move the most weight, like a back squat, but it doesn't have to be. So you've got a squat. Then you've got a hinge deadlift. We call it a hinge, but really it's a pull, right? It's a pull from the ground. So that's a deadlift where you pick something up, you pick a bar off the ground, maybe dumbbells off the ground, maybe bands. Then you've got pressing, and I like both horizontal and vertical pressing. So horizontal would be a bench press, and vertical would be an overhead press of some kind. But again, you could do different angles. You can, if you have shoulder issues, there's modifications.
Mhm.
But if you Monday, Wednesday, Friday do squat every day, deadlift every day, and then alternate between horizontal and vertical press, that is enough to make a lot of progress for the first 6 months to a year and get super strong and muscular, from where you started.
I love that because it's simple.
Yeah,
Because
simple.
people think you need like this complex workout program and you've got all these exercises that you have no idea how to do. If you really master three, four exercises, basics exercises, and do them regularly, you're going to get the results.
It's because they're efficient. They're efficient
Yeah.
with time and they're efficient with your body, which is great, especially if you don't have a lot of time.
Yes.
They're called compound lifts, right? Because they
Yes.
compound meaning multiple. They use multiple, and you know all this, but for the listener, multiple joints. You think of a squat, you're bending your hips at your knees and your ankles. They're all bending, right? Furthermore, when you do a squat, your whole body and your posterior chain is engaged because your back has to stay tight, your shoulders have to stay tight, your scapula's, squeezed, your glutes are tight, your quads, your everything. And then when you go all the way down to depth, you're using all of your hip musculature, from your abductors from the outside to your adductors and groin muscles on the inside, quads on the front, glutes and hams on the back. You're hitting your ankles and calves. You're putting isometric load into your back, right? So you're just getting so much out of one lift. Same with the deadlift. Now the pressing movements are a little more upper body focused, but we need that as well. We need that pushing strength. We need our shoulders to be engaged, right? We need to use our chest, all of that. And then it all uses your back as well.
What do you think about kettlebells? They're one of my favorite tools. Are you a fan or not?
They're versatile. They're very versatile. I will say that you can do it's kind of like a landmine, like which I used to do in CrossFit, and I still have one at home. Landmine, a barbell and a landmine.
Yeah.
They're very versatile. I normally tell people like they're more of a supplemental or like an alternative if maybe you can't have access to other things, only because of practicality and load. Because you would have to have like a whole bunch of kettlebells, or I know they have some adjustable kettlebells nowadays. So
Oh, they do. I haven't seen those.
I think so, with a little dial, and it like changes the radius, so it depends on how big it pulls the bell
Oh,
out.
that's very cool. I'll
Yeah,
have to check that
yeah,
out. Because I love doing
yeah.
outdoor exercises rather than being inside the house. So
Sure.
that I get the whole benefit of being outdoors and the sun and grounding barefoot and all that stuff. So, with the kettlebell, it's so versatile and it's so easy to do. And
Yeah, I
I can
mean,
use,
you could swing them, you can squat with them, you can press them overhead, you can do all sorts of it. I get it. I totally get it. I always just come down to like sustainability, practicality, equipment, blah blah blah. Dan John, do you know Dan John? He's
yes.
like a kettlebell expert. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I always throw his name out there. Amazing guy who, like, you look at him, he's big, comes from the Olympic background, and he can do like snatches and cleans and stuff with a barbell as if he's like a 20-year-old. It's insane. He's so athletic, but he's this huge guy and he's big into kettlebells.
Yeah, it's very cool. So we talked about CrossFit, and looks like you're not a big fan of CrossFit anymore. We've all been there. We've all done that. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people have, but it's still quite popular. What is wrong with CrossFit?
That's a leading question, but I like it. But I like it. What's wrong with CrossFit is it doesn't do what people thinks it does for them, and they're doing it for the wrong reason. So, like, if your goal is to get massive amount of high stress conditioning, and maybe you want to improve the skills of the CrossFit sports because you want to compete in CrossFit, that might be it's one area that it has some benefit. Even the CrossFit athletes, you look at all the big athletes from Froning, whatever, to all the ones today, their primary form of training is strength training.
Mhm.
And then the CrossFit is more the specialization for the sport so that they can compete. So it's like a sport. I did CrossFit for 8 years thinking it would improve my physique or make me stronger. It made me a little stronger, of course, because I went from sedentary to, well, puking and on the first day, because that's how insane it is, to
It's true.
touching, learning how to use a barbell. But honestly, the form was terrible. And most boxes, that's what they call the gyms, right, have decent coaches, but the certification requirements are pretty low. You have to go to $1,000 class and you get certified. And honestly, this is the case with most gyms anywhere. When it comes to trainers, it's very hard to find really good ones. And when it comes to form, CrossFit throws form out the window because a lot of the WODs are time-based and they're
Yes.
rep-based and they're really fast. So I know for a fact I've probably created some root causes of later injuries from CrossFits of deadlifting, 135 pounds as many times as I could in whatever minutes, or trying to deadlift 21 deadlifts as fast as possible. And you're just like slamming that stuff up. And I have personal experience with the whole array of CrossFit. I got decent at some of the stuff as well, and very good conditioning. Let me tell you, like my resting heart rate was down like low 40s. Now it's upper
Wow.
40s, but it was low 40s during CrossFit. Having said all that, it's super high stressful. It can definitely injure you. It doesn't provide the benefit of progressive strength and muscle development over time. And you don't need it in terms of the conditioning. Like if you want to be well conditioned, walking, a little bit of high recovery sprinting, and some extra cardio sprinkled in at like medium intensity is all you need, unless you're an endurance athlete and that's your goal. So that's my thoughts on it.
No, sorry, I agree. And for women over 50, it's we have a huge issue with cortisol. And we
Mm.
don't want to be doing stuff that it's going to spike the cortisol because it's going to mess up the hormones, it's going to mess up our sleep and everything. So that's why I found CrossFit not the best type of exercise for women over 50. What do you
Yeah.
think about like yoga, Pilates, those kinds of things? Can they replace weight training or are they a good addition to weight training?
So it depends. Like both of those have a big spectrum of styles, right? Like yoga has, more strength style versus relaxation, balance. You've got hot yoga, you've got new yogas that I'm not even familiar with, people are talking about. Pilates is a little bit more, you're using weights, right? So I would say, unless you enjoy it and are using it as a form of cardio or supplementary work, it's not really a great alternative to strength training for that purpose.
Mhm.
But I've had clients who do that, or they'll do Orange Theory, or do F45, or they like their what is that, Taibo, or what's the dancing
Or the
one,
kickboxing. Yeah, Lucy
kickboxing,
was
and
Taibo, yeah.
Zumba, all that stuff. And I'm like, look, let's create a pyramid. And
Mhm.
what's at the bottom? At the bottom is lifting, because what you care about, what you came to me to talk about, what your listeners care about is their body composition. They want to be strong and functional. They want to keep the stress low. Maybe they want to lose some fat and have a healthy lifestyle. Okay, let's start with lifting weights at the bottom. And then maybe walking, and then above that is maybe some enjoyment. And this is where the sports piece comes in.
Uh-huh.
Pickleball, Zumba, yoga, actually, I would kind of put as like along walking. I think most yoga is fine as much as you want to do, because it's kind of relaxing and
Stretching,
stretching,
relaxing.
as long as it's not a time stressor, like, oh, I
Yeah.
have to do yoga and I have to lift and I can't fit it all in. But the stuff that uses weights and resistance or something, you got to watch out, because it's going to interfere with your recovery from your lifting sessions, and it's
Hmm.
going to create more stress. And that could also reduce your metabolism a bit and hold it back because of the stress response. So it's kind of like, how do you balance that pyramid? And then sprinkled at the top is like sport, performance, sprinting, like the little bonus stuff at the top that you want to boost your VO2 max a little, or something like that, if
Hmm.
you have the time and inclination. That's my thought on it. It's really about goals and balance.
Do you think sprinting is important?
There's a form of sprinting I think is really beneficial that I
Yeah.
talk about ever since I met Brad Kearns.
Hmm.
He co-wrote the book with Mark Sisson called Born to Walk. Great
Hmm.
book. Suggest everybody get it. And I stole his protocol, and now I use it all the time with clients. So I'm
We
giving
won't
him
tell
credit,
him.
giving him credit. In fact, I'm doing a workshop in a couple weeks called Adaptive Cardio, and I have like a cardio pyramid, and sprinting's in the top section. Because
Mhm.
again, I don't want you to do the sprinting until like you've dialed in walking and have enough
Yeah.
steps and you're lifting weights. But the sprinting protocol it goes like this. It's 4 to 8 sets, 10 to 20 seconds all out,
Hmm.
6 times recovery. So if you sprint for 10 seconds, you rest for at least a minute. So it's not
Hmm.
like HIIT, it's not like Tabata. It's very high ratio of rest to work. And it's no more than 8 sets and no more than 20 seconds per set. And that's it. You never go past that. You just get faster and more powerful over time. That's all. And then you can do that once or twice a week. If you do it twice a week, make one of those not flat ground. So make it on a machine, so it's less stressful,
Yeah.
right? And if you do it flat ground, it's better to do it on like a softer surface, like a track. But I mean, I have a road. I'll just go on there every now, and it's fine if you sprint lightly on your toes, which you can't help but do.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about sprinting, it's anabolic. It's supportive of your hormones and recovery for lifting. It doesn't detract from it,
Mhm.
and it is not running. So let me tell
Yeah.
you, people, if you don't want to run, you hate running or whatever, it's not running. Go sprint as fast as you can for 10 seconds and report back. Send me a note on Instagram. Tell me if that's the same as running. Because I guarantee it's probably not. It's like being a superhero. It's
Yeah.
not running.
No, I agree. I love sprinting. I do it with my dogs. I have a dog who's 16, and I
Awesome.
make sure I sprint with her because it's important for her to run as well.
Oh,
Not
that's
run,
good because dogs
sprint.
can outrun humans. So it's like
Yeah,
easy for them, right?
exactly. Philip, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Oh, a little bit. That's hard to tell you just a little bit about it. No, I'm just kidding. Well, what do you want to know? What do you want to know about
Well,
the
what kind
podcast?
of topics do you cover?
Yeah.
What kind of guests do you have on?
Yeah. So we have 3 episodes a week. Two of those are
Three
solo,
episodes a week.
3 episodes a week.
Wow,
Yep.
well
Yep.
done.
Yeah,
Respect.
yeah, yeah. We've kept up that cadence for a while now. Closing in on episode 400 pretty soon. Yeah,
Wow.
two of those episodes are solo, so they're usually about 20, 30 minutes long. And
Yeah.
one of those is usually on nutrition and one is usually on training, but I get into mindset and engineering principles and all that fun stuff. Friday episodes are guest episodes, so they're a little longer. And we have, I mean, it would be somebody like you, which we should talk, but it would be from the evidence-based space. People like Dr. Eric Helms has actually been on my show. Coaches, trainers, experts, scientists. And then my solo episodes are just me talking like I am to you here about something I'm
Mhm.
passionate about, trying to pull in the science and the evidence and give you practical tips on what to do.
I love that. And tell our listeners where they can find you, how they can find more information, where they can follow you.
Yeah, I'm going to give you two places. One is just go to the podcast right now in your podcast feed, click follow. I'm sure a link will be in the show notes and just
Yes.
give it a try. See if you like the show. The other place is go to my website, witsandweights.com. We recently added a metabolic quiz there too, if you want to take it. It's
Oh,
right at
that's
the
great.
top. So it could be a lot of fun to take that it's like 5 questions. So there you go. Yeah, Wits and Weights podcast or witsandweights.com.
And also on Instagram, right?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, you've got some great posts on Instagram. I just started following you recently and
Oh,
really good
appreciate it.
information. Okay, guys, well, thank you so much for being here, Philip. We really appreciated chatting with you. A lot of great information. I'm sure we could go into so many different rabbit
I'm
holes
sure.
within this concept, but it was really great having you here. And thank you guys so much for watching. Go out there, lift some weights. It's almost 10 o'clock for me in the evening, but I might go down there and pump some iron before I go to bed. Thank you so much. And thank you, Philip, for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Lynn.
Thank you.